the things I always go back to is you talk about the Satanic Panic. And if people don't remember this is what happened in the 80s, right? That there was, satanic cults, and people got a little exercised about this. And you talk about this in that the gatekeepers failed massively during that. I mean, that's one of the most insane failures. When you watch it and you say, how are these people thinking that there's, mass molestation and like satanic rituals and an enormous number of people, smart people at the New York Times, who you point out, but you don't name, but you point out at the New York Times, fell for this stuff.
Absolutely, and there were huge shows. I mean, the trajectory is fascinating. Will I quickly lay out the trajectory?
Sure.
So it starts on Christian radio. You had these guys like Bob Larson, I think his name was, if I've got him right. He'd have a Christian radio show, and people would phone up and say, "Well, I've just been, kidnapped, and I was taken to a house, and they had this big ceremony where I was passed through the body of a dead horse." And he was like, whoa. And then it turned into records, heavy metal bands and so on, if you played things backwards. But the gatekeepers came along and did these huge shows, Geraldo Rivera and people on other mainstream channels, not saying, look at this nonsense that clearly isn't true, but sort of prodding it, well, maybe this is true. It's a little bit like Amanda Knox, I think, in a funny way. That was, the idea of this sort of, good-looking 20-year-old American girl who's also a sex-crazed psychopath.
Yeah.
That's even though it was so implausible, there was no DNA, et cetera, even though it was so implausible, it was just too exciting a narrative to give up. And I think the Satanic Panic was probably too exciting.
I mean, in the documentary about Amanda that was on Netflix, if you were to take away, a villain, I mean, there's a lot of villains in that, the Italian justice system being the number one villain. But number two probably has to be the media, and specifically British tabloids. These people who, are basically saying, we don't care if this stuff is true. It's beyond if it bleeds, it leads. I mean, Foxy, Noxy, and all this stuff, it was fantastic copy for them. It sold newspapers. So when I see, Ian Carroll or whoever these people are that are spreading sort of slightly anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and sometimes explicitly anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, they learned that from tabloids. I mean, they've learned that from gatekeepers and from previous media institutions that, it wasn't clicks, it was buying a newspaper. You could never disaggregate what people bought the newspaper for. But, when I'm in the UK, I used to buy The Sun and Rest in Peace News of the World just because I was so allured by these hilarious, fun, interesting headlines. But there's quite destructive in so many ways, too. Yeah. And I can't say that these people who need gatekeepers, aren't themselves influenced by the gatekeepers and were created in a way by them.